What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Young Guns Season 2. On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing the packaging designs that our designers completed. So first up is Anastasia. Let's take a look at what she's done.
Yeah, what I picked is this white basmati rice. And the reason I picked it is, first of all, it's a very easy packaging to work with. It's a carton box. It's very easy to mock up and just a good material to work with. First of all, the package had a terrible hierarchy. It was all over the place. Sure, the title was pretty big, but everything else was kind of, I didn't really know where to look. And how I solved that by, first of all, removing extra text. On the original packaging, there are two languages. There's English and Serbian. But when you think about it, there is really no need for two languages if the product is going to be sold in one country. In the original packaging, we had Taj Mahal, which was supposed to, tell us a story that this is an Indian exotic product. I decided to change that and use pattern instead, specifically mandala, which is an Indian pattern, and it is circular, and it works really well with the bowl of rice, which is also a circle. And gave me an opportunity to play with different compositions, and I ended up having one on top of the other as a sort of layering. There's a layer of text, there's a layer of like a label, there's a layer of photography, and then there's a layer of pattern.
Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I want to look at the original packaging, and sometimes in our zeal to redesign it and redo everything, we throw away a lot of very useful information. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to observe without any judgment or attachment. I just want to observe the design. So I see that there's this logo, this BF logo, which is actually a pretty decent logo with a little leaf at the top. Benlian Food, which I believe is the brand. Basmati is the type of rice. It's got a brush script. Or not a brush script, it's got a brush typeface. Could be hand done or it could just be a typeface. It's basmati white rice. So there's something underneath that which I can't read. I assume it's gonna say something like aromatic, long grain white rice. Okay, takes 14 minutes, so there's a clear icon of how long it takes to cook, so it's a little under 15 minutes. Non-sticky rice, and it's got the Taj Mahal and this watercolor effect on it. And although it says it's white rice, there's a tone to the rice here. There's some coloring to it. And I see that, and it's served in some kind of plate. It could be like an indigenous design that comes from India. I'm not certain, but it looks unusual, and it's set in some kind of environment that looks photoreal, photographic. Okay, let's take a look at the other sides of this, Ricky. So the 3/4 view here hasn't changed much, right? It's just a continuation of the front bleeding over with the necessary nutritional information and the UPC code. Okay, so I see what we're working with here. So let's go back to the full frontal of the original design. When I look at this, the thing that jumps out at me first is probably the bowl or plate of rice, and it's a tie between that and basmati. And then the second, third read is the Benlian Food brand, and then everything else surrounding it. And usually you can tell because the thing that has the greatest contrast, and contrast is achieved through values, meaning white and black has the highest contrast in size and complexity. Something that's really big next to something that's really small, that's contrast. And contrast in texture and tonal qualities is also a way to achieve contrast. So maybe I take that back. Basmati is probably the first and primary read that I'm seeing here. Tell me if you guys agree. Is it basmati? Okay, now let's take a look at what Anastasia has designed in her reinterpretation of this. I think there's a couple of ways that we need to look at this, and I want to remind everybody about the 5 judging criteria. One, does it feel high end? So it's a repositioning. It doesn't cost the manufacturer any more money to make, but it could have a dramatic impact on their bottom line if they're able to sell it for even 25 cents more. And a lot of times, the difference between a normal product and a high-end product, believe it or not, is just the packaging. Because many manufacturers and suppliers sell to many other people as a white label production, and all they do is do the packaging and the branding, okay? Is it high end? Does it look appetizing? So instantly you're gonna get knocked down many points if it doesn't look appetizing. I hope that we're not gonna run into any of those situations today. Does it have shelf presence? The only way I can tell if it has shelf presence if I was supplied with a photograph of this design next to where rice products are sold in the supermarket. That's critical for me to understand. So right now I'm looking at an abstract. I cannot make that judgment unless it is supplied to me within the shelf, okay? Does it draw out the product features? So in this case, it's long grain, white rice, non-sticky. So that's what I'm thinking about. And that it comes from India and that it's aromatic. Now I'm starting to think about some ideas here, okay? And is it appropriate? So obviously if it looks like you co-opted a different design language and put it on top of here, that's gonna be problematic for us, okay? So what I'm missing from this design right away is where is the brand? And this is a convenient design exercise in that we usually take brands that we don't like or logos we don't like and we just shove them in the corner, and that's kind of what you've done right here. So I'm kind of keeping my eye out on that because the brand is not basmati, it's the type of rice. It's like saying car and then we hide Ford somewhere and we can't tell what it is anymore. And that's a definite thing you need to watch out for, okay? Next up, I'm gonna look at this, that you remove the Taj Mahal, and in most references to India, except for you got this cool, I think you said mandala pattern, which I'm not that familiar with. Obviously, I'm just coming into this cold, but it does feel like an Indian pattern to me. Those of you guys that know more about this can comment on this, but it does feel like some of the henna tattoos I've seen, these kinds of very intricate drawings that you might find in Indian culture on fabrics, on tapestries and things like that. So that does feel appropriate. And it's got a very centered, semi-centered layout here with a kind of a fine graphic element. It feels floral, so I think that's also very good quality. So I'm also wondering about the blue. I know the original package has blue, so I'm gonna give you points for that. But blue tends to read very clinical and very scientific, and this is a food product. I'm wondering if there could be a little bit more warmth. And part of this could probably be achieved by mixing a little hand-done quality so it doesn't feel so sterile. You'll notice a lot of cosmetic or medicine packaging is done with this very clinical look. And so my first thought here is perhaps you can include maybe some texture, like textured paper in the top half, or perhaps complement it with another color that at least swings a little bit towards the warmer thing, or the warmer colors. Another thing I'm looking at here is this typeface. What do we think about this typeface? Now, I think it's an unusual typeface in that it has a lot of quirkiness to it. Look at the way that the T is drawn, the A feels like it's falling over. There's some really uneven lettering in terms of the thickness. Look how thick the B is relative to the T and the A. This is all over the place. I think in this particular execution, you're trying to integrate something that feels hand done, much like the original where it's a brush letter form. I just don't know if it's that successful right now. I wonder if you had explored different serif typefaces and then integrated textures, or maybe distressing the type so it has a certain hand-done quality to it, that might look good. This is a very clean, structured layout. It almost feels like Swiss in its design and approach, Matt, that it's really following a very strict grid. What can we do to inject a little fun into this? With a product like white rice, it's kind of almost like white on white if you do a very simple thing. So I'm just wondering if you can use like a blue glazed bowl. I don't know if that's used in India, so that it has some kind of sheen to it, so there's a different texture to it, because we're looking for contrast, remember. Maybe that could work. Just a thought that I'm throwing out there. I like this pattern that you've chosen. I don't know if you designed it or not, but it looks good. It feels floral, and the little components, the little white dabs that we see in there, feel like they're kind of reminiscent of rice, and the separation that it's not sticky rice. And I personally don't eat a lot of basmati rice, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because every time I go to eat Indian food and I have basmati rice, it is separate and it has a very different and distinct quality. And the last thing that I wonder here is the aroma part. Is there anything that you could do to communicate the fragrant smell of basmati rice? Whereas rice pretty much doesn't have any smell and not a lot of flavor. Is there anything that you can do there? I'm also wondering in your research if you came up with ways about the history of rice, what it means to Indian culture and cultures all around the world, how it's packaged, how it's shipped, how it's processed, and maybe bring a little bit of that story element in here. And what I want to point out to you too is also perhaps dealing with different print finishes where maybe there's a foil or there's different coatings like a varnish coating or something else so that you can really make the package pop and feel premium. All you have to do is take a walk to your local coffee shop and you're gonna see that the story of coffee is told really well. We're very familiar with it. It's sold in burlap bags and how it's roasted and how it's harvested and the plants and people just kind of savoring it. I wonder if we can put some of that into this to kind of really elevate and tell more of a story. I would have really liked to have heard more about the history of the company, how long they've been around, is it a family-owned operation, just to see if you can tell a little bit more of a story. That's it for my critique. I think you did a good job, very clean. It's missing a few things, but overall good job.
At first I was a little nervous as he started critiquing everything, but then I realized that this is actually helping me. This will result in my work improving. So I was able to just put that aside and listen and take the important points out of it. What I learned about my process is that I have to make decisions quicker. So I spent so much time thinking about how to make this product look super Indian, to make it look ethnic, to make sure it's appropriate. But I ended up making it a lot more minimal anyway, so I probably should have made decisions quicker, and maybe the result would have actually been better if I did that. And I guess that's my biggest insight from this whole process, is to find a way to insert emotion and humanity in food products, because it's very important to communicate that something related to home, something related to warmth, to a cultural experience, because this is ethnic product, ethnic positioning. And yeah, that's definitely what I would do if I was doing it all over again.
Okay, so next up is Annie. Annie, what do you have for us?
My initial reaction to this assignment was excitement, because I haven't done a concept project since college. So I'm just excited to tackle it with everything that I learned since then and see the improvement of my process and my execution. This is the product that I will be redesigning. It's called White Rabbit Creamy Candy. When I was growing up, we were really familiar with this product, this candy, because our parents would basically buy this for us on special occasions, give it to us as a treat, and just have it around the house. So you basically see it all the time. So here you can see the packaging of the individual candy. It's very different from the package that actually comes in. It's very distinct. I think everybody who grew up eating this knows that it hasn't changed basically over all these years. It's been the same exact packaging inside the candy bag, but the candy bag is basically gone through a lot of change. So this is how it looks. There's a white bunny on the front, and the logo itself is also a little bunny. So it doesn't quite match, oops, that's the candy, but it doesn't quite match the packaging inside, other than the color scheme of it. The most challenging part of this project is going to be time. This time I made a super thorough and organized plan, so for the next 2 weeks I'm hopefully going to be strict on myself and stick to it. I blocked out as much time as I could to work on it, along with my other jobs. So due to time constraints, this means I have to stick to it super strictly and not spend too much time on any one part of the process, or I might have to rush certain parts of it, and I don't think that I will get a good final product if I do that.
Let's take a look at the original packaging. creamy candy. So Annie did repackaging for White Rabbit creamy candy. I think I've had candy like this in my childhood, but it's been a long time since I've had this kind of candy. This is original packaging, right? So the original packaging, it's got this very unique R where the leg of the R crosses through the counter of the R itself. That's odd, okay? It's got a blue and white and red color palette, an adorable little bunny leaping, and there looks to be like a palette, a painter's palette behind the White Rabbit with dabs of red and blue. And that same rabbit is seen jumping out from, what, as far as I can tell, is that a mushroom? The magic mushroom White Rabbit. Okay, White Rabbit, creamy candy, net weight product of China. Let's take a look at the wrapping paper of the candy once it's been unfurled. So rabbits are pointing to each other saying, haha, who's got the candy? I got the candy. Yes, I just wanted to look at it to get the visual language. So some stripes, okay, I get it. There's something very cool about this, I must say. Look at this with a package. It's pretty cool. Okay, I'm taking a look at Annie's design here, and it's packaged in a very simple white paper package as far as I can tell based on this mock-up. And she's staying true to the color palette of red, white, and blue. And she's reduced a lot of the elements down. Here's my first critique of this, Annie, is that where do you want my eye to go? This is an issue of hierarchy, and there's lots of things that are very similar in size. Let me see if I can mark this up. Let me get a red color. No, I should stay with black. Stay with black. So we have this element here, we have this, and then we have the White Rabbit, and then somewhere in there is this creamy candy and some other extra stuff on the side. I think we need to make a decision as to what we're gonna focus on. I think any one of these things could have worked really well if we just scaled things up and down a little bit. And in a vertical package like this with this many elements, it's kind of hard to find and navigate our way through the design. Now I'm gonna hit undo. Looking at this design, what can we do to do this, to make this better? I think we have to ask ourselves, what the heck is this product for a non-Chinese buyer, myself? I can't read any of this stuff. So if you're going to reposition this to a different audience, to a Western or European audience, I think you're going to want to minimize the Chinese parts so that you are given more room to work with. Now, I can see why you made the type, whatever that says, the red type underneath the White Rabbit logo, why it's so big, because it's actually very interesting and unique looking, whereas the product itself isn't super interesting by itself. We have a dilemma here. How do we manage and merge these two things together? And I think it's time to play around with the White Rabbit wordmark and the creamy candy part. When we think of creamy candy, what do we think about? What kind of images or icons or symbols come up to you when you think about creamy, rich creamy candy? So I think of milk, so maybe udders for cows, maybe puffy clouds, ice cream, so things with cows again, right? Anything else?
Swirls. Yeah.
Swirls. Thick liquid. Okay, so those are some ideas. So there's some things that we can be playing around with, Annie, that I think we haven't fully captured. First of all, we have a rabbit and we have a pretty cute mascot. I think there was an opportunity for you to try to play around with this. So I'm gonna take this in a couple different approaches. First, I'm just gonna play around with the idea of White Rabbit as a brand. And then I wanna think about creamy candy and something that feels like some sweet product, right? So the first thing I wanna think about in terms of rabbit is, what if we did something with a rabbit and its eyes? This is a bad rabbit here. And then you did 2 candy wrappers here as the ears. Maybe that's one. Maybe it's like, it's licking its lips or something. Like it's so delicious. Maybe that's an idea. And I don't know if this is true, but the image that I think of when I think about rabbits is they love to eat carrots, right? So what if you did a stack of carrots or a stack of candy that look like a carrot? And then this had the green sprouty bit. Or you could do something with a little simple shape and then arrange a bunch of candy so it looks like the green tips of the carrot. That's one way to do it. So that's how I would incorporate the rabbit. Now let's talk about how to do this with the creamy aspect. So staying away from milk, because it could be that it's made with 0% milk and that would be misleading. I wonder if some of the shapes that you created could be more circular in nature. So what if you took these red lines that were straight, what if you made them curvy instead? Taking the same design element and making it work for you instead as a conceptual component. Maybe that could work. My cloud drawing days, I've retired. So in case I'm not doing a good job drawing those clouds. And interestingly enough, when I draw these things, I accidentally created something that I feel is very Asian looking. Like in terms of certain drawings I've seen, maybe it's more Japanese than it is Chinese, but maybe that's something you could have done, Annie? Can you hear me, Annie? I also like the fact that you've got some really bold typography. I think if you want to do something like this, and I'm going to butcher this part, I'm going to do this fairly quickly, but go ahead and make this thing really big. For some reason, this feels like it's Korean or something, but I know it's not. I can see now why some of you guys struggled with this, because if you're not an experienced designer, this could be very daunting to do. So what I'm doing is I'm just scaling up the elements that you have already. This almost feels like something the Designers Republic would use, because they seem to use a lot of Asian typefaces, and this feels like something from Designer Republic. And tell me later if I'm wrong, if it's one of those typefaces from the Designers Republic. And then maybe you just really simplify this typeface, the White Rabbit typeface, and just do it right here. But do something much bolder, creamy, candy. I would probably keep this straight and not on a bias, not on a skewed thing, because I don't think it's necessary. It's just giving you less room to work in or work with. And another design idea I have based on this is to try to make it more like pop art. So if you took the original rabbit logo, which I could barely see here, and you cropped into that rabbit that's leaping, I think you can have some nice design opportunities. Do we have this printed out somewhere?
Yeah.
Can I see it? Because I could barely see it on this thing. This is a useful exercise to do too. If you guys are stuck, try cropping into things and make things much, much bigger. That's what Andy Warhol did. He just took an average soapbox and made it 200 times the size, and then you get some really interesting design components. So if you had this rabbit, and the rabbit in my drawing has gained a little bit of weight, right? And maybe you bolded up the lines so it's really nice and thick. Or another idea that you can do, because Annie, you mentioned this whole futuristic retro modern kind of vibe going on, that you could print this thing out and photocopy it and then copy it again and then copy it again until it started to have an old look to it, like you found it off some vintage packaging and you did something with that. And in that case, what I would suggest you do is look up some of Charles Anderson's work, because he's the master at doing retro, giving it that really fun, nostalgic vibe to it. And I think there's something really playful about the idea of a white rabbit and following the white rabbit. So here, I would probably get rid of the mushroom and just maybe do a circle or something. And I think we're allowed to do that so that we can just get a hit of color in here. And now we're kind of freeing up the rest of the space to do something. And this could have that really cool halftone, photocopied, distressed look to it. And I think it could create for a really nice look. And then go much smaller on this. I'm not gonna try to draw that Chinese again. And really call it the white rabbit. up here. Creamy candy. And whatever else, typeface, little bits you can put there. So those are 2 options for you to explore or think about, but that's kind of how I would approach it. Take the brand component you have and just make it really big, find an interesting cropping. What would be really cool too is if you took this and you found a couple different ways to do it so that the back continues the design of this. So if the retailer put this on a packet or on the store shelf and alternate it from front and back, you would get this repeating design. Whenever I see that in the shelf, I'm always thinking, wow, some designers really thinking about the billboard effect of the shelf itself. Instead of thinking of a single unit, they're thinking about repeating patterns. Okay, I've now numbered these designs, the original being number 1, the exploration of using clouds as lines is number 2, and the last one is with the icon and the mascot itself and blowing that up and playing around with that and reconfiguring it, deconstructing it a little bit, if you will. I think that could look really, really cool. What do you guys think? Let me know, number 1, number 2, or number 3. What's your preference? That's all I got for you. Now it's time for me to score your design.
I am glad that he also saw what I saw could have used some work, which was the hierarchy issue. That definitely stemmed from a messy process. I knew at the end, even when I submitted it, that there was a hierarchy issue, but because I didn't allow myself to have enough time to refine it, that's just what I ended up submitting. But if I did have time to go back, I would totally fix that hierarchy issue because I totally get where he was coming from. I struggled because I wasn't sure which market to target. I really loved the bold Chinese typeface of White Rabbit, so I blew it up extremely big, and I thought that was a really nice, bold element. And the candy was right at the bottom of those letters, so at the time I thought it would be okay if the words kind of like trail down into the product, so your eye kind of leads all the way to the bottom, and you don't miss the product because you kind of see both. And I felt like there possibly could have been another layout, which I did make, that would have been maybe more suitable for the final design because it had better hierarchy. But the reason I didn't submit that design was because it featured the White Rabbit with like a blue circle in the back, which is very funny because Chris kind of like drew at the very end of his critique a very similar concept, but the reason I didn't choose that was because I was thinking about what if the consumers were like illiterate, or like maybe they were older, like the older generation who kind of also grew up eating it, but they didn't know how to read. They only knew how to recognize the product. So in the end, I chose the design where it featured the actual product, like the candy with the wrapping paper, which I also I kind of really enjoyed the simplicity of that packaging because it was like mainly white, so it felt more milky. Yeah, so there could have been a better design maybe, but with better hierarchy, but that was the reason I ended up choosing the one that I submitted.
Next up is Maitreyee. Let's see what she's done.
The package that I've chosen is for Japanese green tea. It has a lot of elements on it which makes it a lot crowded. So my job is going to be to make it as minimalistic as possible. This particular product is placed on shelves of stores and even supermarkets. This product is intended for all age demographics, but mostly towards health-conscious consumers. I am more of an illustration person, so packaging layouts is something that is very tricky for me. This assignment is going to be a challenge for me. I'm not sure where I should start, which references should I look onto, and how I should design my product. I think my design senses are at stake, because if I fail, I have to change the way I think while I design.
Let's take a look at the original packaging to kind of get a sense of what is going on here. My first impression of this is that it looks like tissue wipes. That somewhere in there, there's a woman amongst the shrine and the trees and the cherry blossoms holding a cup. It says 50 tea bags, but it's lost in here. I guess where you really know it is the sencha tea. I have some issues with this because this feels like one of those Asian typefaces designed by Westerners, and it feels like that rickshaw typeface, which unless you're doing it ironically, I just don't like it at all. Because I've been to Japan, nothing I've seen in Japan has a typeface that even remotely looks like that. That's the first thing. Let's keep looking at this. Very busy, highly illustrative, super complicated. Now, here's a note for you brands out there, companies that are looking to hire creatives. The tendency is to try to show everything, put everything in the box, and what you wind up doing is you make things look really cheap. My eye does not know where to go, so I think Maitreyee's instinct to reduce things down, to keep it simple, was the right way to go. Okay, let's take a look at her design now. I do want to say this as we're kind of into the third critique, 3 of 7. This would normally be probably about 20 to 30 minutes per person in a critique in a classroom, and we were at the culmination of many weeks of work. So for the sake of TV and what we have to do long distance based coaching and teaching is I have to condense a lot of information down into a very short period of time. So there's a good chance I'm missing and skipping critical steps in the design thinking process. Having said that, let's dive in. The brand is Malesna, and I thought it was a Japanese brand, but it's not. It's from Sri Lanka, and that's totally okay. But we're conveying this is a Japanese green tea, and that's a style of tea, I believe. This is one of those things where I'm gonna have a little bit of an issue that it's from Sri Lanka, but it's saying it's Japanese style green tea. Got a little problem with that. I'm gonna assume then, just for the sake of design, that this is actually from Japan, made by Japanese people according to hundreds of years of tradition, and Japanese are known for the ceremony around tea drinking, okay? Very much so, so there's a lot of culture, history, and customs baked into this. Right off the bat, I'm a little concerned that this does not feel high-end. It feels pretty middle of the road in terms of the way it's positioned. It's a big improvement over the original, no doubt, but I just think, again, when you look at really premium tea and how it's packaged, this does not feel that way to me. I think photography would help a lot. Custom printing techniques, again, we mentioned this, all the different tricks that you've learned in print design, maybe there's an emboss, maybe there's different paper materials. I think a more natural box would help, and things looking a little less white all over would help as well. This could feel like some kind of, unfortunately, cough drop, candy product. It doesn't quite feel like green tea to me. I think we need to see leaves, green tea leaves. That would make a lot of sense. Or some kind of immaculate setting for how people drink tea in Japan, like the tea ceremony part, which I don't know anything about, but I've seen pictures before, okay? There's a whole way that you drink and the way you dress and the way you consume the tea. You smell it, there's a certain art to drinking tea, and this feels a little bit cold and sterile to me. I think even in the illustration that you've done down here, this illustration, it feels like a cartoon. It feels like a caricature of a Japanese woman. I'm not feeling it right now. I think there's so much rich history in Japan, the culture, patterns, artwork, just to bring into this. Even if this box looked like it was made from wood, it could have been a wood package if you wanted to. Like it actually came in a little balsa wood packaging. That's another thing that you're gonna know about Japanese people. They're amazing at packaging, and everything looks like it's been wrapped up for you like a gift. This does not feel that way. So we can layer materials. I'll tell you what I mean. And this might get a little extensive here, but we could have created a little label. A seal, if you will. There could have been a seal here, right? With some kind of design on it. So it feels a little bit more premium and special. We could have heroed up on the logo itself and built a design language around it. We could have wrapped it in another sleeve, like say there's a sleeve here, or different materials. You'll see that a lot of high-end packaging does this, where they mix materials, where this could be corrugated cardboard, so it still feels natural. And it's wrapped around the original packaging, which has a more earth and natural tone. I suggest maybe going black, a matte black paper, or one of the beautiful French papers that has some kind of speckle component to it, some kind of recycled fiber. I think that would look really good. And then maybe with a hot foil stamp, like a hot silver foil stamp on this would look really good. And some elements of photography. Transport me. On a different episode, Brian Collins talks about how books are like rocket ships. I think in a way, packaging is like a rocket ship. It transports you to some other place. It reminds you of something. And having a 30-cent cup of tea might temporarily take your mind on a little vacation to Japan with the cherry blossoms or this elaborate tea ceremony that we've been talking about. This is what I think is really missing from this package. I'm not in love with the vector graphics. I'm not in love with the typefaces. Again, if you looked at Japanese calligraphy, some of it is an art form in and of itself, just the brush strokes. You have to be a master to be able to draw like that. I would have loved to have seen some of that brought in here, even though it's a product of Sri Lanka, okay? That's all I got to say about that. It's time for me to judge your package design.
So looking back now, I think I would have changed a lot of things. Adding calligraphic brushstrokes would be a great start and made it look more like a luxury product. I think it is all about understanding the product itself, which I didn't give much time to. I think I'll definitely add it in my design process the next time. I think it is all about understanding the product itself. I would definitely give it more time in the future.
Next up is Meghan Kreger. Let's see what you got for us, Meghan.
So this is the package design that I ended up going with. I think that these illustrations are pretty cool. I really love having these Japanese characters. I think that those will be super fun to work with. The only thing I'm a little bit nervous about is the logo. Not the best logo. There's a weird white stroke around it, so that'll be interesting to work with. So for my design, I wanted to incorporate a sort of wabi-sabi minimalist Japanese aesthetic. I did this by reducing the colors just to the colors that are in the logo, which were red, black, and there's a little bit of orange in the logo as well. In the original package design, there's a woman wearing traditional garb and she's harvesting the tea leaves. So I really wanted to reserve this importance of the green tea leaf itself, and I did that through illustrating the actual green tea leaf. And then I included a story on the other side of the box just to give a little more insight into the Japanese culture. The original packaging literally just had the nutrition facts and some instructions for how to make the tea. So I wanted to add just a little bit more to inform the consumer. To succeed, I think it would just be awesome to receive some feedback from Chris because I didn't get the feedback in the portfolio review, and also I'm self-taught, so I feel like I really missed out on a lot of critique or just hearing feedback about my designs from other people who are more educated in the field or have been designing for a longer period of time. Something that I think happens a lot in design projects is underestimating the amount of time it's going to take, especially when we have to stop and record our process and make sure that we capture all of this creativity. I think it's definitely going to take a lot longer than we expect. I feel pretty confident and I'm ready to get started. I feel like we kind of had an advantage because we saw the original Young Guns do their package design. So I'm hoping that all the girls really come out and show these boys what we can do.
Okay, thanks very much, Meghan, for the review of your process. Let's take a look at the original design once again. So this is J Basket Bancha green tea. I've never even heard of Bancha green tea before. Interesting. Bancha green tea. And this is by J Basket. Okay. Huh, interesting. And then a woman harvesting. Wow. Okay, when I look at this, it's not horrible to begin with. It's not. It's got a lot of stuff. But if we cycle towards the back of this, that looks really beautiful to me. It's kind of interesting, like when you don't have to try to say everything that you want to say about something, that can be really beautiful in itself. Now, it doesn't quite communicate tea, but with a little bit of a modification, this would work really well. What I assume those little broccoli looking things are tea bushes or tea plants, right? But if you took the same idea and created a pattern made from tea leaves and alternated the colors like this, it would instantly communicate tea and it would keep this minimalist aesthetic, and I like it a lot. So this all it has on the back is the directions and then the best before, which is not even supposed to be part of that design. Okay, so let's look at the front cover once again. It's interesting. So this is like a fake ethnic food product made in America. Put it right back into ethnic thing. So this is very interesting. This is a positioning play. Okay, now that we know something about the original J Basket Bancha green tea, let's take a look at what Meghan came up with. Okay, now Meghan, since we've spoken a little bit about brush lettering and calligraphy, this is one of those opportunities where I personally, if I were you, since I can't do this calligraphy and I don't read this, I would have asked somebody on the internet who's Japanese, who is really good at calligraphy, and asked them to write this again for me with a really thick, beautiful stroke, and so that there's that quality to the brush mark itself. Another thing too is the leaves. I'm not sure if you illustrated the leaves or not, but they feel very digital to me. If this were something that you were to do in a Japanese style art form, I think that would look really good. Maybe it's one of those watercolor brush paintings. I'm not sure if that's Japanese, those ink brush paintings. Those look really beautiful. Or you can go Western style, like those scientific illustrations that Darwin might draw, or these specimens that are really beautifully drawn. There's something about this that feels very clinical and cold. And on top of that, you put on a dot grid pattern behind it, further emphasizing how cold and sterile it is. So I feel like from an appetizing point of view, we're falling short of that, okay? I see everything else that's on here. There's nothing else for me to talk about, because the two components you've added are the tea leaf and the red pattern, the dot pattern in the back. Okay, having said that, it's time for me to score. What do you guys think? Was it being too hard on Meghan? Do you think I was being fair? Let me know in the comments below.
Watching Chris review my work, I just kept thinking, like, why did I say wabi-sabi? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I let somebody else do these illustrations for me? Just lots of whys. It's also pretty hard to watch somebody critique your work. I definitely did a lot of that whenever I was in art school, but I haven't really had someone do an official critique for my design work. And knowing that it's going to be on YouTube and thousands of people are going to see, it's definitely pretty nerve-wracking.
All right, guys, that was a lot of designers to get through in this episode, so let's break this into two parts. I just want to give a shout out to Sony, who sent us a bunch of cameras so that the quality of the videos that we're going to be producing are going to be amazing. Thank you, Sony. All right, now it's time to check out what Monica has done. Monica, what do you have for us?